A powerful earthquake just hit Antarctica's edge, not the frozen interior, one of the strangest active boundary zones on Earth. The shock was shallow. The system underneath is not simple. What looks like one rupture in a remote place is really a break inside a margin where rifting, microplates, and the remains of an older subduction system are still pulling the crust apart. A magnitude 6.6 earthquake is not background noise. Not when it hits this shallow, about 5 kilometers deep. That means brittle upper crust breaking close to the surface, inside the active part of the system. And this was not Antarctica's silent interior. It was the Bransfield boundary, a margin already active enough to generate huge swarms and measurable ground movement. The M6.6 did not reveal a quiet place suddenly waking up. It hit a boundary that had already shown exactly what it is. 85,000 earthquakes. That is what this boundary zone produced in a single episode between 2020 and 2021. The most intense seismic sequence ever recorded along Antarctica's edge, not one swarm, not a cluster of dozens. 85,000 separate ruptures, sustained over months, inside a system that most people had never heard of before the ground started shaking. The new earthquake was shallow, about 5 kilometers deep. That is not a signal from a distant sinking slab. That is brittle upper crust breaking close to the surface, which means the energy had nowhere to go but outward. The 2020 to 2021 swarm was strong enough to move the ground by up to 11 centimeters on King George Island. On 11 centimeters of measured displacement from seismic activity alone, not a single large rupture, but accumulated breaking across an extended episode. And beneath all of it, recent analysis points to a tear in the Phoenix slab, the remnant of an old subduction system, roughly 15 kilometers long. The deep structure is not intact. It is already broken. A boundary that produced 85,000 earthquakes, moved the ground by centimeters, and carries a torn slab underneath it does not become quiet between events. It loads. The M6.6 is not an anomaly inside this system. It is exactly what this system does. The Bransfield Strait is not one clean fault. It is a back arc basin between the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetland Islands, transitional between continental rifting and ocean spreading. The old Phoenix subduction system did not leave stable ground behind. It left a broken margin. Extension keeps pulling the basin apart. Microplate motion keeps the stress field uneven. And recent work points to a roughly 15-kilometer tear in the remnant Phoenix slab beneath the region. 3 separate systems are loading this boundary simultaneously. The Antarctic Plate provides the large-scale structural context. The South Shetland microplate sits above it, moving semi-independently, squeezed and rotated by forces that pull it away from the peninsula. And beneath both of them, the remnant Phoenix slab, what is left of a subduction system that is not fully resolved, is torn. A 15-kilometer tear in that slab sits near the area where the largest recent seismic episode in this region's recorded history was centered. That is the force chain. Old subduction built the geometry. Back arc extension keeps driving the crust apart. The broken slab and microplate boundaries focus stress into a system that has no stable configuration to fall back on. The 2020 to 2021 Orca swarm ran for months inside this same boundary. 85,000 earthquakes, 11 centimeters of measured surface displacement. That episode did not break the system or release it into calm. It demonstrated what the system is, a boundary that can stay continuously active, accumulate displacement across an extended episode, and still produce M6 class events after the swarm is done. The earthquake is not an anomaly. It is what this boundary sounds like when the extension keeps running and the broken structure underneath keeps responding. The machine did not start with the M6.6, and it was already running. The Antarctic Peninsula did not start as a quiet frozen margin. For tens to hundreds of millions of years, it was a subduction zone, an active convergent boundary where ocean crust was being driven beneath the continent. That process built the geometry that still controls the region today. The Phoenix Plate was the engine, the peninsula was the overriding wall, and the South Shetland Islands were the surface expression of the arc that grew on top of it. Then the Phoenix system began to collapse. Subduction slowed as the spreading ridge that fed the Phoenix Plate was consumed. The old convergent engine ran out of material to drive it. But the boundary did not resolve into something stable. It stretched. As subduction wound down, a back-arc extension began pulling the South Shetland block away from the peninsula, opening the Bransfield Strait behind it. That process started roughly 4 to 5 million years ago and has not stopped. What was left behind was not a healed scar. It was a transitional boundary, part continental rift, part incipient ocean basin, carrying the broken remnants of a subduction system that never fully detached. The Phoenix slab did not descend cleanly and disappear. It stalled, tore, and remained partly in place beneath the region. The same extension that opened the strait is still pulling at a crust already weakened by the transition. The 2020 to 2021 Orca swarm made clear this was not ancient damage sitting still. The same boundary produced months of intense seismicity, measurable surface displacement, and probable magmatic intrusion. The system was actively deforming while most of the world was looking elsewhere. The M6.6 belongs to that same unfinished transition. The structure that produced it has been breaking in one form or another for millions of years. The earthquake hit a remote polar region. No city sits on the Bransfield Strait. No dense population center absorbs the shaking. And this is not a mystery rupture in supposedly stable crust. It struck a boundary zone that the scientific literature already recognizes as tectonically active. Both of those things are true. Neither of them makes the structure simpler. Remote does not mean geologically contained. The 2020 to 2021 Orca swarm produced roughly 85,000 earthquakes and moved the ground by about 11 centimeters, not in one hard event, but across months of sustained, measurable deformation. The boundary stayed active long after the first signals appeared. Distance from a city did not slow it down or limit what it could do. The system ran on its own schedule, indifferent to how far it sat from anything built by people. And knowing this boundary is active is not the same as understanding it. The Bransfield region remains comparatively sparse in instrumentation. The scientific literature is direct about this. Remoteness limits seismic coverage, and coverage gaps mean the full geometry of what is moving beneath the strait is still being resolved. A recorded earthquake is a data point. It is not a complete picture of the system generating it. The M6.6 was detected, its depth was measured, its location was confirmed. The torn slab beneath it, the microplate boundaries around it, and the extension still pulling the basin apart, those are not switched off by the fact that one event was well located. The structure does not care that it was measured. King George Island is the operational hub of the northern Antarctic Peninsula. More national research programs concentrate facilities there than anywhere else on the continent's edge. Argentine, Chilean, Brazilian, Russian, Chinese, South Korean, Polish stations, among others, compressed into one island sitting directly inside the active Bransfield boundary zone. This is not a distributed network with redundant nodes. It is a single gateway. The 2020 to 2021 Orca swarm moved the ground on King George Island by about 11 centimeters. Station infrastructure absorbed that deformation without catastrophic failure. But the swarm also demonstrated something the location makes unavoidable. The people and operations most exposed to Bransfield seismicity are the ones already there, running year-round programs, maintaining the access corridors that the entire northern Antarctic science network depends on. When seismic activity disrupts air or sea access windows in this region, there is no rerouting. The logistical margin is already thin. Supply cycles, personnel rotations, and field deployments are scheduled around narrow weather and ice windows that leave almost no buffer. A sustained seismic episode, or a hard rupture affecting port facilities or runway surfaces, does not produce a detour. It produces a halt. The boundary that generated the M6.6 runs directly beneath the most operationally concentrated patch of Antarctica. The stations there were not built in ignorance of the geology. They were built where the logistics made sense. The geology did not stop moving, because the logistics required it. King George Island is not just a cluster of research stations. It is a transit node. The Teniente Rodolfo Marsh Airport on the island handles the airlink between South America and the Antarctic Peninsula, one of the few airstrips in the region capable of receiving wheeled aircraft from Punta Arenas. Station resupply, personnel rotations, and emergency medical evacuations for multiple national programs all move through that corridor. There is no equivalent backup on the peninsula side. The dependency extends outward in both directions. South of King George Island, the Antarctic Peninsula Research Network, dozens of stations, field camps, and seasonal operations spread across hundreds of kilometers. Depends on the northern gateway staying functional. Equipment, food, fuel, and medical support do not arrive by any other route when that corridor closes. North of it, the connection to South America carries not only scientific logistics, but the bulk of Antarctic tourism traffic. The South Shetland Islands and Antarctic Peninsula together receive the overwhelming majority of all Antarctic visitors, and the access corridor runs through the same zone the M6.6 just ruptured. A sustained seismic episode that disrupts runway access, port operations, or coastal logistics at King George Island does not produce a delay in one country's field season. It compresses the operational window for an entire multinational network running on schedules that were already thin before the ground started moving. The boundary beneath the island is not carrying a local risk. It is carrying one of the few functioning gateways to a continent that has no redundant routes in. The M6.6 is the event people noticed. One hard number, one shallow rupture, one location near Antarctica that made the maps. What did not change is the boundary beneath it, a back arc system still pulling apart, a microplate still grinding under uneven stress, a remnant slab with a 15-kilometer tear already in it. The 2020 to 2021 swarm produced roughly 85,000 earthquakes before this rupture existed. The structure was broken then. It is still broken now. The visible story is one earthquake. The real story is a boundary that has been actively deforming for millions of years and has not resolved into anything stable. This was not Antarctica waking up. It was an already broken margin doing exactly what it does.